Welcome to another Artis Opus tutorial. I'm going to be showing you how to paint this guy with dry brushing and contrast paint. Welcome to another Artis Opus tutorial. Today we are going to be approaching this lovely Nighthaunt scheme. It's a pretty classic one. It's based on Games Workshop's. It's our take on it. I'm using contrast paint and I'm using dry brushing pretty much exclusively, and then we've popped it on a lovely base. So the idea with this kind of level of painting is that it takes a little bit longer than basic, but if you do this over an entire army, you will have an incredibly striking looking force. It's really high tabletop standard. And of course, if you want to take it to the next level, you can slow the steps down, do them a little bit more carefully, and then you can have a really, really incredible force. You can adapt it just to fit whether you're trying to get something down fast, medium, or slow at whatever quality suits you. So please let us know if you like the video. If you don't like it, if you'd like to see other Nighthaunt schemes, then by all means let us know. I love these models. I think they're fantastic. I really like simple, striking models which have got a lot of character, and they certainly tick all of those boxes. So give us a subscribe, let us know below if you'd like to see anything else in future content, and let's crack on. Okay, so our base coat is going to be a mix of Lupercal green and Abaddon black. Just using a large here. Now the reason for mixing these two is because you want something that is pretty much black but has something else going on. So give those a mix, and all you're looking here is to coat the entire model. It doesn't matter if you do it with wiping or smushing or stippling or whatever version of covering technique you want to use. I'm going to use a combination of all of them just to make sure that we've got coverage all over. So once that's base coated, we'll come back for stage one. Okay, for stage two, we're just using a little bit of white scar. And what we're doing here is we're doing some pre-shading. So starting at the bottom of the model where we'd like things to be the brightest, we're just putting down some work to ensure that whatever colours we put over these come out as bright as possible. So concentrating on the bottom of the base. No need to be particularly careful until you get up to the middle of the model here, really. We're just building up some layers, and what this is going to make sure is that whatever colours we put down over the top of this, they're going to be all the brighter. So our brush has got a little bit of the previous colours in at the moment, so each time we go back for more white, we'll end up with a more pure mix, and therefore we'll manage to get a couple of stages of this. It's only pre-work, so don't worry at all about being precise or getting it perfect, especially if you've got an army to paint of ghosts. Of course, if you want to take ages doing it because you want to do some perfect job on an individual model, then rock on. But here, I'm just trying to get something down to help our next stage. We're jumping to Ahriman blue. Games Workshop have about 1 million blues that are all very similar. You've got Sotek green, you've got Temple Guard blue, Thousand Suns blue. They are all kind of within the same spectrum. If you want to change and use your preferred one of those at this point, then you should absolutely do that. It's not something you need to worry about whatsoever. As long as you follow the same steps with similar colours, you will get pretty much the same result that I'm getting, but you'll just get it customised to your army. So we've got some of that paint on our brush, removing quite a lot on the texture palette. We don't want this to be too heavy. What we're going to do is start building it up over our previous white stages that we built up here. Now, this won't look too neat yet, but it's just a matter of being patient and building things up step by step. So in the middle here, I'm going to be fairly like heavy-handed. As we work our way up, I'll change to buffing. And this is going to make sure we gently catch all of the edges and creases in the cloth, detail around the arms, hood, that type of thing. Once you've done your heavy-handed midsection and you've faded it upwards and you've got less paint on your brush, then that allows you to proceed with a little bit less caution and just kind of catch everywhere and fade between the two a little bit better. Okay, for the next step, we're actually jumping back to the white. A very small amount of it, getting it on every angle of our brush. Of course, it doesn't have sides, but that's kind of how it feels. Using our dampening pad, softening things a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're really carefully going to lay down some work to make sure that our next stages land and land more easily on those edges. So working against any edge we have, we're very softly, see how little pressure I'm placing here, we're very softly working our way against any fold. You don't work your way up and down it, you work your way against it. So these, I'm coming at this direction, these ones here, I'll go probably from both sides to give it a slightly even coat, but what we're doing here is achieving some really nice levels of detail with not too much difficulty. Okay, so for our next stage, you have a choice. If you want it to be slightly more greeny, you can go here. If you want it to be slightly more bluey, you can go in this direction. I can't make mine up, so I'm gonna do a little bit of both. But either way, just pick whichever is your preference, or what fits with the rest of your army or your basing scheme or something like that. So I'm going for Baharoth blue, which I really, really like. Kind of a very pure crystalline blue. And given that we want it to be lighter towards the bottom, that's where we're starting with a bit of stippling, pretty much covering everything apart from the very bottom, which will make much brighter. And then when you get to these sections, again the same stuff. You want to cover over the sections you just made white, and this blue should land a little bit more easily. Softly building up that texture on the cloth. You can do buffing in circles, or you can work your way against the edges, or do a little bit of both. And a middle ground is normally best for this type of stuff. And as you get confident there's less left on the brush, back to my dampening pad, kind of reawaken that paint a little bit. Make sure that you're not taking a wet brush to the model, but we're taking one where the paint is nice and soft. It's going to leave a little bit more easily. Then we can jump to our Gauss Blaster Green. Just a tiny bit of that in the bristles. I can take a similar approach. So Mitch is really starting to take place here. I've got Ulthuan grey, and I'm just going to add that to my bristles. My bristles haven't been cleaned hugely from the previous step, so what we had there we've still got. Heavy-handed at the bottom, where we want it the brightest. We still have some highlights that we can reserve for highlighting these sections, and then once we've worked that off, we'll work our way up the model. Proceeding with caution. It's a pretty fast step anyway, so it's worth taking a tiny bit more time on it. Go back and hit these edges and the cloth sections. So much lovely detail in these models, and a lot of it is hidden facing downwards, so it's up to you whether you want to take the time to paint that or not. It's not going to get seen very often. So I'm just removing as much as possible of the paint from my brush. Now, the reason for this is we're going in with white scar as a final highlight, and I'd like this to be as white as possible. So you can swap brushes, that's absolutely legit, or you can do what I've done and try and work off as much excess paint from your brush as possible. This will, of course, you're pretty much cleaning your brush at this stage, therefore it'll make cleaning easier afterwards, and it's a really good habit to get into just for extending the life expectancy of dry brushes. So now I've got that white, just working our way all over. Don't worry if it looks a little chalky, it's hard to avoid that when you are using pure white on a largely dark model, particularly towards the top. We're going to be hitting it with an all-over wash, and that should help remedy that stuff. So make sure this gets all over the model, not heavy, but you want to hit it from all perspectives. And now we're on to detailing the rest. Okay, so we're going to be hitting the skin with a 4:1 mix of Ulthuan Grey and Zandri Just. The Zandri Just is just in there to help promote better coverage and make things slightly bony. The metallics, going to be Ironbreaker for the silver and Retributor Armor for the gold. Both fairly bright ones. You could use brighter or darker here if you wished. And then the default red for the trim around the hood is going to be Mephiston. Right, so this is already looking pretty good. You could put this on a tabletop now, that'll be absolutely fine. So if you are looking to have a speedier version, then you could absolutely stop it there. However, what we're going to be doing is using a couple of contrast paints and fancying this up. So we're making a mix of, believe it or not, 1 part this to 12 to 15 parts of this, and that is because Leviathan blue is super strong and Aethermatic blue is super weak. So to get something that looks like it's 50-50, we're going to have to mix a massive proportion of this to this. Okay, so probably goes without saying, but I'm using a brush that has seen better days. This one that I reserve for washes. I'm just going to take a little bit of water, add it into that mix just to make it behave a little bit better. So what we're going for here is a thin coat all over the model, like absolutely everywhere, even the red bit, the metallics, all of that stuff. We're looking to get absolutely every part of the model. Best to try and avoid pooling anywhere, so if you see it looking excessive, these parts are absolutely fine, it'll help it look nice and ghostly and ethereal, but anywhere where you've got excess, just use that as the point to take the rest of your paint from for the next few steps. So if I think there's too much here, I'll just soak it up and I can take it and place it on the rest of the model. So I'm going to let this dry, and then a super efficiency tip, what I'm going to be doing is taking exactly the same mix, like this, taking a little bit of our Abaddon Black from earlier, mix them together, and then that is going to form the darker wash that I put again over the metallics, basically. Okay, so that is beginning to look really, really nice now. Any of these stages you can stop at if you wish, so you could stop here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and do a little bit of highlighting on the silver sections. I'm going to hit the trim of the red with the same color again. All of this is just a repeat of the base coat colors before the wash, used as highlights. I'm really pleased with how this kind of bluey black wash has worked on the gold. That looks lovely. And we're going to work through that type of stuff and then get cracking. All right, so as far as last detailing goes, one of the nice things you can do is go back to your Gauss Blaster Green and Ulthuan Grey. I'm using a medium here, so step down in terms of brush size a little bit. Mixing these two. Gauss Blaster Green really does get overpowered quite easily, so Ulthuan Grey is surprisingly good for coverage. It's really good for general ghosty duties, and I'm going to carefully buff up some more stages of highlights here, just to bring back what we've lost from the wash a little, but this should also soften things. Ulthuan Grey is really, really good for this. So all over the ghostly tendrils, we're going to bring these up, and then what we'll do is we will do another soft layer involving white scar, and that should be things pretty much finished. While you're here, you can actually hit the hands with the same wash, same highlight. Okay, so carefully jumping into white scar. I really want to make sure that this stage goes on softly. So to the dampening pad, remove some of the previous stuff we've got. Take a little bit of Gauss Blaster Green. We want that still kind of going on in our bristles. Work most of it off, and then a little bit of white scar. This is where a texture palette's invaluable. You can remove it equally over all the different angles of your brush. I test it somewhere like a nail. Often end up removing too much, but that's better than removing too little. And then you can go back to your piece with no worry of anything untoward going on.
something like this. Also, just as a note, I'm doing this stage before I do the highlighting on the silver and stuff like that, because it means that I can be less controlled with this. I don't have to worry if I do hit the silver, I'm going to cover that over anyway.
Okay, so once again, there is the model. Like I said, I'm super pleased with this. I really like the colours. Unsurprisingly, it's a little bit turquoise. I think it's super striking, and again, you can go to whatever stage of this tutorial you want. If you want to stop before the contrast, it'll still look solid, especially when based. If you want to do the contrast but not the dry brushing, that's cool. And if you want to do the entire lot, that is also cool. Equally, if you wanted to go and like rust up the chains or do some final highlighting, you could take this in whichever direction you want. So thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, comment and subscribe, hit that bell notification, and we'll catch you in a future video.